Welcome. This is Timothy Carroll and Carroll Consultancy Group bringing to you Matt Walden. Matt is a trained osteopath, actually has a master's as an osteopath, travels the world teaching for the Czech Institute for many years now, has worked with some of the world's top football clubs like Chelsea Football Club and other Premiership football teams, worked with elite athletes, top leaders, and so we're bringing Matt to you to discuss today the 6 foundation health principles. Last time we had Matt on, we talked about principle number 1, which is eat right. Today we're discussing breathe right. And so Matt, wonderful to have you back.
We're going to be having me back.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Let's crack on with helping our listeners to understand more about breathing. Why is that important in the context of COVID-19 and also for life in general? And having top health.
Yeah, sure. Well, so it sounds a bit of a kind of, I don't know, if someone says you breathe right, you say, well, what does that mean? How, we kind of do it naturally anyway. We don't have to think about how to breathe. And that's absolutely true. But the thing is that we often develop habits often related to our psychological profiles. Things like anxiety is a classic one that tends to take us into what will be termed a dysfunctional breathing pattern. So that could be when we're under stress at work, when we're under stress because of what's going on in the news at the moment, relationship challenges, financial challenges. And it just switches our breathing pattern from one where we're primarily breathing through the nose, which is the sort of optimal way to breathe, to one where we're breathing through the mouth. Now, one little proviso here is that when you're speaking, you do breathe through your mouth. So you might be watching me and go, well, hang on, he's saying you should breathe through the nose, but he's breathing through the mouth. That you do that normally when you speak. So tying that in with COVID, if you're worried about something like COVID or any other kind of airborne pathogen, well, then you want to not be talking when you're out and about at the shops or mixing with other people, because that forces mouth breathing. And the mouth really isn't set up effectively for good immune defense. So humans are the only creature on the planet that are not what's called an obligate nose breather. So an obligate nose breather means you're obliged to breathe through your nose. So all other animals do that, including babies, human babies. But as we grow into small children, the tongue doesn't quite grow as much. So that when we're young, relatively the tongue's much bigger and it fills the throat. So we can't breathe through the throat. We have to breathe through the nose and get the air down the back. But as we grow into adults, then the tongue gets relatively small and it allows us enough clearance that we can breathe through the mouth. And that indeed is what allows us to talk. So the reason nose breathing is so important is that right alongside your nose here, you've got what's called paranasal sinuses. And those paranasal sinuses produce a gas called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide blends in with the air that you breathe in. And it's highly antiviral, highly antibacterial, a very potent force to essentially clean the air.
Incredible.
So that's one element. That's one element of it. Also, of course, you've got lots of hairs in the nose, and they help to protect the lungs from any pathogens that might be in the air. You've also got structures in the nose which are called turbinates. And turbinates, literally the name comes from turbine. So it turbines the air, it swirls it around. And we know that we've also got mucus in the nose, okay? So depending on how you are, whether or not you're allergenic, whether or not you've got a cold, will mean that the mucus levels vary, but there is a degree of mucus in the nose and down through the throat. And that's designed so that as the turbinates swirl the air around, well, it traps the dirt and it traps the bacteria, and the air actually gets deeper down into the lungs when we breathe through the nose than it does when we breathe through the mouth. So it's like, these are small apertures here, and this is a big aperture. So it's just like having a garden hose with a big aperture, and then you squeeze the end of it, and now suddenly, it fires further. Well, it's the same with the nose. When you breathe in through the nose, you get the air firing further and deeper into the lungs. And down in these lower lobes of the lungs, down here, that's where you've got a series of sensory receptors, which are called parasympathetic receptors. And what the parasympathetic receptors do is they essentially keep you calm. They keep you sort of level-headed, relaxed in a rest and digest state. Now, up the top of the lung, in the upper lobes here, you've got more what are called sympathetic receptors. And those receptors tend to get stimulated when you mouth breathe. And, when you essentially are being very active, like, so when you're running or something like that. And they have, so the sympathetic component there is essentially taking you into a fight-flight state.
Right.
So we certainly want to mouth breathe when we're doing exercise. That's quite functional, particularly high intensity exercise. But when we're doing low intensity exercise, like walking, or when we're just sat at our desks, typing away all day long, or on the phone, whatever it is, we want to primarily be nose breathing for all of those reasons. So, so that's what it means.
Great
to breathe
stuff.
right.
How does one shift a behavior like that? Like, what would you recommend for people who want to be conscious of how they're breathing? How do you train that in? Like, do you have any exercises or thoughts on like a tool that people could use to be better at nasal breathing? Now we understand what to do and why that's important. How do you recommend people train that up to become a habit?
Well, there's a few tools. One is that if you just swallow, so if you to do that now, if you swallow, and the tongue goes up, if that's the roof of the mouth, the tongue goes up to the roof of the mouth and it flattens against the roof of the mouth.
Yeah,
that's the swallowing action. Okay, and so what that does is it actually seals off the oral airway, which means you can only breathe through your nose. So if you swallow and then just sit there with your mouth shut, you'll find that you can only nose breathe. And that's, just a good start point, is to say, okay, well, just while you're sat at your computer, if you suddenly catch yourself with your mouth open or mouth breathing, then just stop, swallow, get that tongue in the rest position, and then you'll find it will be quite natural to nose breathe. Now, this is where, again, coming back to the original point of what does it mean to breathe right? Well, quite often there are certain things that impact on our ability to breathe right. So it could be you've got an old trauma to the nose. A lot of rugby players and martial artists and boxers and so on, they'll have had a broken nose at some point. Mm-hmm. And so they often have a deviated septum, and they may have challenges with getting the air flow through the nose. So that's one thing that's more of a medical situation. You may want to go and get that looked at with a medical specialist. But there's other things like food allergies, which cause mucus buildup in the nose, which are extremely common. And a lot of people don't realize. They just think, oh, well, I get a bit of hay fever, or I get a bit of reaction to dust, or I get a little bit snotty when I drink milk or whatever. But they don't really see it as a major issue. But what it does is it blocks the nasal airways enough that the body reflexively drops the mouth, and starts breathing through the mouth. That then takes you into this sympathetic or fight-flight state. And when you're in a fight-flight state, you get anxious. And when you get anxious, you increase your breathing rates. When you increase your breathing rates, then you get more anxious, and you get caught in this loop of anxiety and breathing, or essentially stress. So it's a form of kind of a poor management of stress when you start to mouth breathe and you start to get into this anxiety loop. So if you're feeling stressed out, one of the best things you can do is to just stop and take several deep breaths, but do it through your nose. Do these deep breaths in and out through the nose, and that will calm you down quite quickly, quite effectively. So, so that's one thing you can do in terms of, you mentioned actual techniques. So swallowing is one. You can also set a timer. It's quite a good thing to do. So just set a countdown timer on your phone or on your watch, on your computer, every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, whatever works for you. And when it bleeps, you just pay attention. Am I breathing through my mouth currently, or am I breathing through my nose currently? So that's a useful little simple tool that we've all got access to. And again, when you know what breathing right is, then you can correct yourself. But so, some of the challenges with breathing right are the mental emotional side of it. So when you're feeling under stress, you'll tend to move to a mouth breathing pattern. But also there can be, like I say, biochemical reasons, so nutritional quite often reasons. So someone's intolerant to dairy or intolerant to grains or gluten or whatever, and they're consuming it still, that can be enough to block the nose and force a mouth breathing pattern.
Super interesting.
And then,
super interesting on that, because the previous session we were talking about eating right. So eating right falls into breathing right. If we're not eating right, it can prevent us from breathing right because of allergies and the clogging, or eating too much dairy, creating mucus, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting that you can see how these are. It starts with getting your nutrition right, getting your eating right, becoming clear of on the nutrients that are going in and getting them balanced, and then that'll help us breathe right. Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they all intersect with each other for sure.
Yeah, and so next session we're going to be moving into having a look at moving right. So breathing right is going to help us to move right. So that's the next topic.
It is, yeah, and moving right. I mean, the last thing I was going to say there is that moving right helps you to breathe right. So one of the things that being in a chair tends to do, it tends to collapse us into a position of exhalation. Okay, so we're stuck in exhalation, and actually we need to be able to open out and go into inhalation, which we tend not to do much, if at all, during the day, because we spend so much time in this position of exhalation at our desks. So to breathe right, you actually need to be able to extend through your thoracic spine and stretch through your stomach and retract your shoulders, which a lot of people actually would need to do some stretches and some mobilizations in order to be able to get to a full inhalation. So so we can talk about that more next time.
Excellent, mate. Well, I look forward to that. Thank you very much on the tips on, what is breathing right? Why is it important to breathe right? And how do we do that?
Yeah, excellent. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.